All right, welcome everybody to our Coach Huddle Monday nights. We're excited to see you guys. Again, last night of April, we're on to May.
Yeah,
bigger, better things. I'm sure more flowers blooming and more sun shining. Hopefully for us, It's been really rainy.
I saw some Midwesterners post that it's warm. Somebody had sunglasses on, but Margie said her furnace was on when we were. When we were sunglasses and the wind was down the windows were down in our car. So yeah, some people are still cold.
Yeah, but we have kind of an exciting topic tonight. I had done a call earlier this week with some friends, and there was kind of the topic of having this big, like, amazing milestone and then sometimes like reverting back a little bit. And so it made me think back to this book that I had read that made a huge impact in my personal health journey as well as my coaching practice. And so I just wanted to kind of give you guys some of the Cliff Notes versions of it tonight. It's called The Big Leap. Probably one of my all-time favorite books, I would say, because it really did help me have some profound breakthroughs in just identifying some hidden barriers. So one of the main concepts of the book is that we all have within us kind of this internal thermostat setting where we have this thermostat of like how much love, how much success, how much creativity we're going to allow ourselves to enjoy and embrace. And sometimes when we exceed that thermostat setting, we will do self-sabotaging behaviors and bring ourselves back down to that area of safety or that area of where we've known and where it's been kind of it's not even comfortable, but it's just the safety of, again, that's where we've, the familiar and what we will allow and deem acceptable for ourselves of what we're worthy of, usually a lot of the times too. And so it made me also think to this other story I had heard a while back about the impala. Have any of you guys heard of that animal or seen that? I'm not referring to the car.
Not the car.
The animal.
Not the like super sweet ride and all the rap songs.
Right, exactly. Not that one. Talking about the animal. So many of you have probably seen this animal in the zoo, and it is confined by like a 3-foot little wall. Yeah. But what's crazy is I had a friend that talked about being out on like a safari and seeing this animal in the wild, and an impala can like launch itself and jump like 13 feet in the air or 30 feet out. That's insane, right? But yet when you go and look at it in the zoo, it's confined by a 3-foot wall. And they asked the zookeepers, how are they able to kind of like keep this cap on this animal that is so powerful and has this like amazing gift that it could easily launch above that 3-foot wall.
If properly motivated.
But they won't, because for the impala, they've been bred since, for the ones in captivity anyways, bred since birth to like have that barrier. And so that's all they see. They only see that barrier. So even when they grow past that, they still see themselves as small and incapable of passing over that barrier. And I think how many of us does that relate to as well?
Sounds like a job. So you feed them 3 squares a day and you love them, then and you make them not have to work very hard and they're happy. So that what need would they have to try to get out of that, right?
Right. But I think that, again, that relates to, I know it related to me. When I heard that, I was like, wow, like I'm the impala. Like I have been living a life behind this little hidden barrier, behind this little tiny 3-foot wall, when I could sense and feel it in my being, though, that I am capable of more. And so again,
yes, please. No, neither. Yep, that's perfect.
All right, somebody checking out, I think. There we go. All right. So back on to The Big Leap. So again, probably one of my all-time favorite books. But again, it talks about that thermostat setting. We all have that kind of cap of how much love, success, creativity we're going to allow into our lives. But then it also breaks down into some of these different zones where people tend to live then. So there's the zone of incompetence. This is where like we are not good at it, not skilled at it. It's something that we usually should be delegating and putting out for other people, unless it's something that you want and desire to master because it's a passion or a calling of yours. So like if you want to become a great skier, that's something you should continue to pursue. They gave the example in the book of like somebody that was trying to set up a printer when he's like a pastor, and it's like, you're not using your gifts and you don't really have the need or the desire for it. Like use your time wisely and let somebody else do that. when you're incompetent in that area. There's the zone of competence where actually a ton of people actually spend far too much time, where I would say that's kind of some of the safe work, even the easy work, where it's like, yes, you can do it, but anybody else could do it just as fine, just as well. But a lot of us spend way too much time in there, and they kind of coin that as like the area of like, or the disease of unfulfillment. I think how many of you can like kind of relate to holding yourself in that area where it's like those tedious, doing the laundry, doing some of these like little tasks, but playing it safe, playing it small. The next one was the zone of excellence. So these are the things that you do extremely well, but there's also a really strong temptation to just kind of stay there, where that's where actually a lot of our family and friends even kind of want us to stay. Yeah. You do well, but it's still a cap.
That could be a career, right? A career that you do better than most people, but you might not necessarily be gifted in.
Yeah, exactly. The one that is like kind of the pinnacle, like, so this is where we all want to start living our lives on that regular basis, is in the zone of genius. And so these are the activities that you are uniquely equipped and suited to do. They draw out your special gifts, your special strengths. When you continue to ignore them, though, this is usually where the depression, the illness, the injuries, and relational conflict starts to emerge and come from. So it's really important to start identifying some, like, your zone of genius and where do you operate best using your unique gifts and skill sets.
If you avoid them, then all of that stuff comes in.
If you continue to ignore operating out of your zone of genius, that's where, that depression, the illness, injuries, and relational conflict tend to come. And so again, going back to that upper limit idea, that's that thermostat setting that upper limit. Many times if you hit that, you start maybe even living in that zone of genius. Sometimes we like back ourselves back off though, and create some personal dramas to bring ourselves back to a place of known or safety.
What's that thermostat that you're talking about?
Exactly.
Okay.
And then in the book, they gave kind of the foundation for some of these upper limits though. And so there's 4 main hidden barriers that he talked about, and it's usually based on fear or false beliefs. But so important to recognize. Is this helpful, guys? I hope that this is like, when I read it, I was like, wow, like, this is what I needed. I didn't realize how many of these hidden barriers I had been living behind.
Right. And you operate, like you said, in those zones for a little while. That upper limit problem shows up, right?
Right.
There's like this, and maybe it's just me, but not if you have had this happen. Like, you end up getting to a certain level higher and you're like, I can't believe I'm here. And this happens in our weight loss journeys, to some extent, but any sort of talent that you're pushing towards, you hit this high mark, and then there's some sort of low thing, and then I kind of fall into the thinking like, yeah, that was too good. That was too good. Like, I shouldn't expect for to continue in that kind of thing, because it was just too good. So this is okay. I'll deal with this for a little while. I don't know if anybody can agree with that.
Yeah. You see it a lot of times, like in celebrities and like musicians and things like that, where they get an award and then they kind of have like a crash afterwards, because again, that was like their limit of how much love and creativity and abundance they were going to allow into their lives. And so they sabotage afterwards.
Sustaining that level of success is really difficult.
Yeah. Unless you decide that you want to choose to expand and reset that thermostat. So here were the 4 hidden barriers that most of us can either identify and deal with. This was my huge one, was feeling fundamentally flawed in some way. And so this is, again, you can either choose to continue to have this false belief, or you can choose to let go of those old limiting beliefs and allow yourself to expand to a new higher level. But this is also where a lot of people, they think if they even start operating in that zone of genius, either people think that they don't have a zone of genius. I know that I was there too for a long time, where I was always comparing myself to everybody else. And I'm like, I don't have anything that I'm great at. Like, I just mediocre at most things. But again, that's a fundamental flaw or false belief that you don't have a zone of genius. Every single person does. And so then it's even kind of telling yourself like to continue playing it small, because then if I fail small. How many can relate to that? But again, we want to continue.
We can deal with the failure.
We can deal with the minor, small failures. But again, the more that you're going to be operating in that zone of genius and allowing yourself to expand and to grow, you're going to start flourishing. The next one is disloyalty and abandonment. And this one really hit a chord with me too, where it says, my genius will cause me to end up alone, disloyal to my roots, leave people from my past. And so your guilt for potentially thinking that you might be leaving people behind causes you to hit the brakes.
Yeah. What's that quote on the coach page, your banner on the Facebook page?
I change that very often, so I'm not sure.
It's like, don't put out your light just because it's shining so bright. You know, somebody says, go back on our coach page and check that out.
There's another one that relates to that too.
Okay, yeah, I can't quote it right now, but.
Yeah, so this one talks about having those success with bouts of the self-punishment afterwards, because you're worried about leaving people behind. And I think a lot of people, especially in health journeys, that can be a real trigger, because many times when they're starting to get healthy, they were in that unhealthy state originally because they were surrounded by other people that were very unhealthy. And many of those are family members and close friends. So it can be very scary to start trying to move forward and thinking that you're going to be leaving these people that you love behind. And it doesn't need to be that, but that's that false belief, that hidden barrier. Number 3 is believing that success is going to bring a bigger burden. I know that this was a big one that held me back for a long time, because I continued to think as I was growing, it was going to be so much more responsibility and so much more than I could bear, or more money to manage, or more people to be in relationship with. And I was just fearful of the success. And so that was a big hidden barrier for myself too. I pretty much have all 4 of the hidden barriers, if you haven't guessed this yet.
I can relate to all of them too. So yeah, the self-punishment for sure. And then I'm in that current one right now, just about the amount of work that I think it takes to not just achieve it, but to maintain it. That's a very self-limiting.
For sure. And then this was my biggest one though, the crime of outshining.
That's the other one.
Yeah. So this is the quote that there was I must not expand to my full success, because if I did, I would outshine so-and-so or blank, and make them look or feel bad. And this one's common even among gifted children. So they will end up making themselves look worse, because it's easier to deal sometimes with the sympathy rather than to deal with the jealousy that can come. I give this example pretty often from my boot camp days, where I had trained and worked really, really, really hard. And we had a physical fitness test, and I did way more push-ups and way more sit-ups than anybody else. But when they came around and they were asking everybody how much they did, I lied and said way less, because I didn't want to outshine these other people. But I think that, again, this is such a misconception in our society, even in general, because if you are just truly operating out of your zone of genius, like we're talking about, and you are shining brightly with your gifts, with your light, you're going to cause other people, or allow other people to start embracing the same for themselves. And so I think back and I wish that, gosh, what if I had been honest in that moment? Our whole division could have had a very different experience. We could have been a really stellar, group of us pushing each other to the next level to see what we're fully capable of. And so since that learning moment, that learning experience, that's what I love to see within our team and within our clients and within our family and friends and everything too, of letting your light shine, letting your gifts fully shine and be out there for the world to see, so that you're allowing other people to start embracing their own zone of genius too.
It's really uplifting, right? I mean, that's what I've heard from elite athletes, and then Navy SEALs and stuff like that. That's the leadership that they all embody, right? And I wouldn't even call it competition, because they're all on the same team, but it's that kind of thing where everybody's growing, and it just ratchets it up the whole way. That would be a great thing.
Exactly.
In this organization for sure.
Yeah. And that's what we're really seeing too, which is so fun to be a part of. But then what they talk about again, so for some of you just joining in, we're talking about The Big Leap, one of my favorite books. And talking about identifying your hidden barriers or your upper limit, and being able to work past them. So the great thing is that the book talks about when you start to identify them, it's like turning the light on in a dark room. And so it's been dark for a long time, so there might be some mess to clean up, but how much easier is it to clean that up when you actually can see what's going on and identify and understand what those barriers have been and what they are. So these are the ways, though, that many of us will actually start to see those upper limits in our day-to-day life, though. What we will do to, again, sometimes create those personal dramas to bring us back down to that original thermostat setting instead of changing the setting to allow ourselves to expand more to a higher level of creativity and success and love. Number one, and this one was a long one in the book, is worry. And they talk about worry, like it can be useful if it actually concerns a topic that we can do anything about. But for most people, worry is a true addiction. So you sometimes need to ask yourself, is there any action I can take right now that would make a positive difference with this worry? But the great thing, again, when they were talking about identifying if worry is an addiction, like if you can't go a full day without worry, you could really look at, is this a true addiction that I'm dealing with here? But the nice and the humbling thing, though, is to realize with the worry, it's like they gave the example of like, it's like playing a slot machine and you realize you've had your finger on it the whole time and you can take your finger, like you can let it go. They gave the example too of like holding onto a tennis ball with those worrying thoughts and just imagining releasing it, because that's the power that we do have over our own thought life, is that we can let it go and it does not have to hold us.
There's if you call it an addiction, it's like there's chemical responses to that.
Yep.
So it's absolutely something that you're going to drift back into, but you just keep repairing your thinking, right? You keep saying no. And in a lot of cases, it's sort of what Dr. A talks about, where he says you go into your sort of lower brain and you're not really thinking, right? So it's one of those things that you can question it. If as soon as you start to question the worry, like, is there like you had said, is there any possibility that
an action I can take that would make a positive difference?
As soon as you start questioning yourself, you get right out of that type of thinking, and you're starting to use your upper brain again, and then you're out
logical,
of that.
your rational brain.
Yeah, you're solving problems. So definitely a good tool
to
use when you're worried, and you don't even know it. It's like you're drifting off, and you're thinking of what if this and what if that, and you go, wait, no, is any of this true? Is it really true? And really try to think about it.
Yeah. The bright side of worry, though, is that if you are worrying, sometimes there can be something positive that's trying to break through. And so sometimes it can be that pause to look back and put yourself in that observer's chair of those thoughts, put them out on the table and look at, like, what is the positive thing that could be trying to emerge through all of this. Another big one that they talked about was criticism and blame. So that, usually the thing that we're actually criticizing doesn't have anything to do with that thing. And so that can be, again, a way that you're putting those limits on yourself. Another one is deflecting. And so that's like kind of flicking off the compliments that might be coming in. Yeah. That can be a big one for a lot of people.
You can call that disqualifying the positives.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when somebody would give me a compliment, I'm like, well, they don't like some sort of music compliment or something like that from a non-musician. I go, well, they're not a musician, so they don't really know. I heard my mistakes, and so I don't even thank you, but I don't really take it. But that's horrible.
Yeah, but it can be an upper limit way that it's showing up in that day-to-day life. So even teaching clients they're going to be getting a lot of compliments, right? Where people are going to be noticing that change. And that can even be, that's usually can be for some people. It can be really thrilling, and then it can be really scary for some that has been their protective, like they're hiding. Yeah. And so now it's hard to accept those compliments. So teaching them even to hear it, take that pause, and know that it's okay to accept it and allow that in. Another one is squabbling. And this one was great. It kind of gave the example of, like, so many of us, when we enter into that squabble, it's really trying to, like, play the victim role. And you're trying to convince the other person that you are the victim. But most people end up, it usually doesn't go like person A, like, why are you doing this to me? And then person B, like, agreeing that they just take all ownership, that it was completely their fault. Usually it's like this battle back and forth of, like, who is the actual victim, and trying to give proof to it. And then once that cycle starts, it just continues round and round of, like, who stays in the victim seat. So there's really not a ton of growth that can come from that. And so recognizing that each person in the squabble needs to just take 100% of the ownership, because usually what happens is you have a squabble like that and somebody's trying to give the other person the 80% and they'll take maybe 20. But it's like, if you just both have that 100%, things can be resolved a lot faster. Another way that people hit their upper limit, and this one is so interesting, but I really recognize it in myself too, is people getting sick, getting hurt, following sometimes those periods of great success even, or periods of good time. three other ones is punishment, prevention, and protection. So again, sometimes it can be that punishment for the success that you've created for yourself. It's so funny, right? Like the games that we play with our own head to put us back into that safety of what's been known. But the thing is to start to identify sometimes the more that we are getting sick or having some of these same messages kind of continue up, like maybe even pop in the chat, like from these ones that I'm reading, some of the ways that you've been identifying that some of your upper limits that you've maybe dealing with? Like, is it the worry? Is it the squabbling? Is it the blame or the criticism? Could it be the punishment, prevention, or protection, or getting sick or getting hurt? I would love to hear what kind of stood out from some of those. But the biggest thing is these will stop annoying and stop continuing to have these same cycles when you get the message that's trying to break through. And when you recognize some of these, when you see them coming up, like see Brandon and I, to give you an example, we went through an amazing marriage conference over the weekend. It was so great. We got through so much. And you know what happened today? I was so irritated the whole day. I was so irritated, and I was like trying to pick fights with him and everything after we had just had this amazing connection over the weekend. And so I can stay in that, and I can stay in the squabble. I can stay in like the blame or whatever else I want to do, or I can recognize, okay, I need to adjust my thermostat setting and allow more love and more success and more creativity to come in. So I would love, again, pop in the chat. What are some of yours that you've been able to recognize?
I want to pause and say thank you for owning that. You didn't even tell me about that. So that's awesome.
Funny how life has, like, I had already planned to go over the big leap, and then I was going back through that one, and I was like, oh, right. Squabble. I forgot about the squabble one. So life has a funny way of doing that to you. But again, the great thing is the more that you can start to identify some of the ways that they show up in your daily life, the more that you can also start to recognize the signal and the message that's coming through. So again, you can adjust that thermostat setting to allow yourself that more love and more success to come through.
Yeah. A lot of these break your consistency. If you let any of them roll in, right? It'll break the consistency, and you don't have to get it, because that's a lot of different things, and I'm sure there's more, because we're human and our brains are completely unknown, ridiculous. I would just say you don't have to get it 100% right. Like, write down the trip ups, write down the successes at the end of the day, sleep well, and just try again tomorrow. And
keep wonder about it all instead of, it's easy to start going into the criticism of yourself and the shame like, oh, how did I, like for me again today, how did I go there? How did I go to the squabble?
Right after.
But to just keep that wonder of recognizing, okay, I'm building this new home for me to start living in the zone of genius. So these messages are going to come through, and I can identify them now and just look at them from that observer's chair to move forward in them. And again, I love this of what is my genius? How is it? How can I bring forth my genius in ways that will serve others and myself? So I would say kind of maybe tonight go through, if you didn't want to put it in the chat, totally understand, but kind of make a list of like, what are some of your upper limit behaviors that we were chatting about? Is it the worry, the blame, the criticism, getting sick or hurt, the squabbling, you're hiding your significant feelings, not keeping agreements, not speaking significant truths, or deflecting. There were a lot in the book. So again, I would highly recommend it. It was, again, one of my favorites. But to just keep that attitude of wonder as you're exploring some of these things, and to recognize they're going to come up, but it's a good thing because we want to be able to identify them so that we can change that thermostat setting. Because who wants to hit some success and then move backwards? We want to just continue to expand and grow and help others start to do the same so that they can also shine bright in this world. And not have everybody kind of hiding in these little safety walls. And so again, if you didn't hear the beginning of our talk, it was kind of talking about that Impala. And I think we're all created to be those Impalas where we can launch ourselves 13 feet in the air, 30 feet out, and we don't need to have that little 3-foot wall like at the zoo that's holding us back.
Better get a bigger wall.
Exactly.
I wanted to show I love the visual because, like in any sort of case where you're in, I don't know, you have a skill, maybe it's in high school or college or something like that, but they go, people say you're a big fish in a small bowl. Like as soon as you jump out into a bigger bowl, there's a lot of growth. I just want all of you to know you're this goldfish, right? You know what I mean? And if you're not, you should be, because I don't know. I mean, I feel like they should have like multiple bowls, you know, you keep getting into bigger and bigger and bigger bowls, whether, you know, whatever context you want to apply that to, because I don't know. I think that's the way we're supposed to be. And it's scary at first. We've gone, I don't know how many times we've moved, 12 times. And it's always been related to some sort of major like accomplishment. And then we move on to the next accomplishment, and we didn't know a soul. You know what I mean? Every time we go to a new place and stuff, and it's scary in the beginning, but you start meeting people and you start getting your feet underneath you and everything like that. So I just want to encourage you. It takes time, but it is the way it is supposed to go. Yeah. And so the more you hold back, the more you stay in this bowl, and it's comfortable. But then, has anybody ever owned a fish? What happens when the fish stays in that bowl and nothing changes? And it's gross.
Yeah, we don't want to be in that old bowl.
Stagnant water.
But, and I love the breakdown too that the book gave, as well as with that zone of incompetence or competence or the excellence. Those are like boxes, so they still keep you confined. So even that zone of excellence, the competence and the excellence, those are good ones, but this still keeps us confined. Whereas that zone of genius is kind of like this upward spiral staircase where you can continue to just elevate over time.
And it's going to take an outside person to spot that.
Yeah.
So, you know,
keep leaning into your
coach and
your mentorship.
Just think of because you're all coaches. Think of your questions. If you kind of put your thinking out there on the table, and you ask that like you would ask a client, like, why is it that I feel this way, or what is it that's holding me back? So just ideas.
For sure. But love spending this Monday with you guys, and feel free in our group page to pop any other questions. I'm happy to answer, but I know we're out of time right now. But we're so excited for the breakthrough that so many of you are having. And so again, I hope you know our hearts are just as everybody continues to have breakthrough, we don't want to see anybody create those personal dramas or that personal self-sabotage to move backwards. We want to continue to help you and choose to expand onto your next level and continue to go up that spiral staircase instead of stay in those boxes. Yeah. So
I love Margie's chat in here. I had a fish that jumped out of a bowl. It died, of course. Moral to the story, aiming. That's awesome. That's right, though. Goal setting and
know where your target is. Yeah, love that one.
Need a coach. You need a coach.
Awesome, you guys. We love you all. Have an awesome Monday and happy May. On to setting new goals, right, for yourselves. Bye, everybody.